So, hello and welcome to the SportsNewsBlitz podcast brought to you by the SportsNewsBlitz website. My name is Matthew and we're back hosting another show. And Casey has very kindly joined us again. Hello, Casey. Thank you for coming.
Not a problem, mate. Thank you for having me once more.
No problem. Always a pleasure. And we've got another very special guest with us today. And it's different this time. It's not BBC 5 Live. It's not Sky Sports. We've got a TNT commentator today. And it's Adam Summerton. Adam, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. So with these podcasts, what we like to do at the start is get to know you a little bit better and let you get to know us a little bit better. And before this, what we've done is ask favourite film and song. Now, this is getting a little bit boring, I think, and I think we need to switch it up slightly. So what I would like to know is, what is your go-to meal deal?
Well, I'd say my favorite food is sort of Mediterranean, Greek, Turkish, that kind of thing. I'm actually going out for an Italian meal tonight, but I like tapas. Does that count as a meal deal, or are we talking Tesco here? Are we talking?
I think we're talking Tesco and Boots
Tesco.
Here. We need a meal deal.
Tesco, I like the chicken and stuffing sandwich on brown bread.
Mm-hmm.
What? Oh God! Should have given me prior warning for this. I mean, these are important details I need to be prepared for. What crisps would I have? I don't know. McCoy's steak crisps. Is that all right?
This is your meal deal, Adam. Whatever you fancy, you can have.
If you'd asked me my favourite movie, that would have been Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, which has got a cracking soundtrack as well, if anyone ever comes across it. Very good.
Hasn't that got quite like a everybody knows the soundtrack, but they don't know where it's from sort of thing?
Yeah, there's Dusty Springfield on there. There's all sorts. It's brilliant. Highly recommend it.
Okay. Do you want to go to favourite song as well? We might as well do
favourite song. That's impossible. I can't answer favourite. It'd probably be something by Oasis, I would have thought, but it's almost impossible to pick that.
Could it be off your new Nebworth album?
It could well be on there. Yeah. I was very lucky to get that for my birthday, so yeah, it probably would be on there. I suppose cigarettes and alcohol would be right up there, I would have thought. But there's plenty of Oasis ones, isn't there? I couldn't pick one.
I think you could pick most of them and you'd be pretty up there.
Yeah.
Casey, it's a brand new topic. What's your meal deal?
Look, I very much vary depending on how I feel. But 9 times out of 10, I'll get a ham and cheese baguette sort of thing. You know, the one you get in the long packaging.
Mm-hmm.
Thai sweet chicken. McCoy's, I think, and the Fanta fruit twist. I feel like that's me pretty much 9 times out of 10.
I like it a lot. To round it off, I think I'm joining you, Adam, on the chicken bacon stuffing sort of sandwich.
Yeah.
I'm a salt and vinegar crisp man. I'm quite happy with any of them, and if they do an apple tango, I'll take an apple tango.
See, I'm a water man these days. Tango, yeah, no, not going there. I don't know if it's an age thing.
Oh, right. We'll move on from your very boring drink choice, and we'll move on to the actual questions while we're here.
Fair.
So the main reason me and Casey know of your work, and the main reason a lot of people do, is because of the football. However, we're going to steer away from that slightly just for now. And I know you're quite an avid sport watcher just in general, and a big fan of sports. And obviously the Olympics has recently just started. Team GB have already got off to a good start. I think we've got a bronze medal already, which is fantastic. What are you most excited for this Olympics? Because I feel like the hype for the Olympics isn't as big as it used to be. I don't know if that's just me and how I feel about it, but how are you feeling about the upcoming Olympics?
I always enjoy the sprints, really. They're the things that I look forward to the most. And my sort of standout Olympics moment of all time really is probably Linford Christie winning in Barcelona in '92. I was about 12 then. I watched a documentary the other night about him, and that race was included in it. It really sort of sparked a lot of childhood memories for me. So that would probably be my standout moment. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy dipping in and out of it all, and it's the coverage is going to be really good. Obviously, with the company that I mainly work for, Warner Brothers Discovery, have got it all across their channels. I've put in so much into it, and I have to say, I was looking at it earlier this morning. It looks absolutely fantastic what they're doing, and right across all the events. So yeah, but if I had to pick out what I look forward to the most, I'd say it was probably the trap. But yeah, I take what you're saying about. I think it's maybe I go back to my childhood. I suppose with the Olympics, particularly with the Team GB people. I don't even think it was called Team GB then, but they were more household names. You know, I can think of people like Backley and Sally Gunnell, and as I say, Linford Christie, Colin Jackson, Tessa Sanderson. They were all huge household names in a different era, and maybe I don't know, maybe we'll get household names come out of this Olympics. I suppose that's what Olympics can do, can't they? They can create careers, they can create personalities, and a lot can stem and flow from a successful Olympics. But yeah, maybe quite the sort of the personality side of it, for whatever reason. Maybe it's because there's a real divergence of choice these days in what we can watch, how we can watch it. I suppose back in the day, you're looking at only a few channels, aren't you? And maybe that plays a part. I don't know. And social media inevitably seems to play a part in most things in life these days in terms of the media. But yeah, it's an interesting point that you raised. That I was thinking about that the other day, actually. Why do we not know these people quite so well as maybe we did in the past? But maybe we will after these Olympics.
Adam, do you think it's strange how, like, there's, like, for me, like, it's like what Matt said, when there hasn't been too much, like, how do you say it? There hasn't been too much like a presentation online. I haven't really seen too much about the Olympics. Do you think that's sort of strange in terms of the fact that, like you said, when you're younger, you kind of watch it a lot, but as you obviously grow older, like, I can say for myself, like, I've not watched too much of it already. Do you think it's different now, or do you think it's been more like outshone by the fact that obviously the Euro 2024 is literally just finished, and like the whole world was watching that? Maybe they don't know too much about the Olympics now.
Yeah, I think people sometimes with the Olympics, it just takes time to get into it as well, because a lot of it's about stories and narratives, and they develop, don't they, as the time goes on, as the competition goes on, and I think that we may well see that. So it's one of the reasons. I mean, I loved covering. I've always loved covering the National League because of the stories that you get within it, the narratives. I think as a broadcaster, as a journalist, they're what you look out for a lot. And the great thing about the Olympics is that it gives you fantastic stories, because a lot of these competitors, they're not people who are like Premier League footballers that get so much attention. They're not all incredibly wealthy. They, a lot of these people are having to really go out there and find sponsors just to be able to participate at all in competition throughout the year and throughout the cycle coming up to an Olympic Games. So within that, you'll find that there are lots of fantastic human interest stories. And I think the Olympics for me are a really special part of it. And I always found that as well, covering the National League, to look at a different sport and a different way. I think that they're what, as a broadcaster and as a journalist, if I can put that hat on as well, they're the things that you're looking for as well, because they really spark. I mean, look at that. The young girl who I think is competing again this time, I think in the BMX, she was very young. I think the last Olympics, her name, was it Sky? Her name escapes me now, but she was one of the great stories to come out of the last Olympics. And you'll probably find that there are more that happen this time, not just with Team GB, but right across the piece. And I'm sure they will get lots of publicity, and they end up with quite a lot of endorsement deals off the back of the Olympics as well. It can be quite lucrative, can't it, for the athletes if it goes well for them?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, we wouldn't know personally, but I'm sure it would be. Yeah,
not on your meal deals, no.
No, not on our meal deals, no. You said about there's a lot of exciting stories that tend to come from the Olympics, and you search for them sort of soul stories and the human element of such a large scale event. Is there anything or anybody that is already kind of standing out to you as like, this is someone that I feel like I need to watch, whether it's Team GB, whether it's another nationality? Is there anyone that you think their story is fantastic? If they can do well here, that tops it off.
There isn't yet, and the reason being is because I've maybe I suppose being a football commentator and solely a football commentator, maybe I'm a little bit lazy in terms of looking at other sports. But one of the things that I've looked forward to with this Olympics, and something that as the days go on, I'll get more and more into, is learning about though. That's one of the joys sometimes of the Olympics, because as I said earlier, these people aren't always necessarily household names. Yes, there are huge names who will be participating both for Britain and for other nations in the Olympics. That goes without saying, but there are people that you take a joy in learning about, don't you? Particularly if it's not your particular sport. I mean, every single time the Winter Olympics on, I always get into the curling. But if you ask me to tell you anything about curling in between the Winter Olympics, I wouldn't have a clue what was going on in that sport. But you take an interest in it while it's going on. So I think that's one of the joys of watching the Olympics, is you watch things and you get engaged in things and you take an interest in sports and people that you wouldn't necessarily at any other time.
That's fair, Adam. But my final question for you on terms of the Olympics, obviously you've mentioned there that you've watched it so far. If there was anyone watching right now who hasn't yet, if you could almost intrigue them, give them one piece of advice as to why they should start watching, how would you sell it to them?
As I've said, I think it's the stories for me. It's obviously the individual competitions, the intrigue of something like the blue ribbon events, like the 100-meter final. Obviously, everyone's going to have an interest in that. I would imagine that'll be the most watched event probably, along with some of the other athletic competition as well. But I do really put, as again, I go back to being a broadcaster and with a journalistic background as well. I put a lot of stock in learning and those stories about the individual competitors and their journeys. That for me is, I suppose that taps into the whole Olympian spirit, isn't it? What makes sport so great. And this was the original, worldwide sporting competition, the Olympics. It's why we love it so much. It's the heritage. It's described as the greatest show on earth. And I think a lot of that is that striving to get to that point. I mean, if you ask many people who are participating at the Olympics, they would say it's the greatest achievement of their lives, of their careers, just to be there. I think there was some archive footage of Linford Christie at his first Olympics, which I think was Seoul in '88. And he said, as a young man competing at his first Olympics, he said, look, this is the biggest achievement of my life, before he went on to be as successful as he was. So I think to know as well how much it means to the individual competitors, again, to go back to football, when I'm commentating on something like, whatever level it may be, the Champions League final, the Europa League final, or a National League promotion final, you can tap into what it means to the fans of the teams involved, but also the players involved as well. And I think that's a lot about, for me, what makes covering sport special, and sport special in itself, in that it's the journeys that people go on to get to the points that they do. I think that's a huge part of storytelling within sport. I think it's so important. People want to know how somebody's gone from maybe running in their local park to standing on the podium as a gold medal winner at 100 meters. I mean, that's a fantastic story to be able to tell, isn't it? And everyone's got their own story, and it's up to us as broadcasters to be able to tell those, I guess. And that's I think that a lot of people will find so interesting about the Olympics, and always will.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. I think that's something I'll certainly be keeping an eye on going forward anyway, more into. You've already kind of touched on the topic, and we'll bring it back around to football now, so we'll steer away from the other sports. The National League is obviously a league me and Casey know quite well, which is, we might not want to know it as well under the nature we did. However, we do. Chesterfield and Bromley recently got promoted. Chesterfield as champions, the rightful champions as well. Bromley going up through the playoffs. I'm sure you'll have seen a lot of those last season throughout the National League campaign. I'd like to know how you think they're going to fare when they reach League Two. We saw Wrexham obviously go straight up to League One again, which they've done fantastically. Notts County kind of came in, did quite well, lost Luke Williams, stalled, and found themselves sort of mid-table. How do we think Chesterfield and Bromley will fare?
Well, first of all, I mean, Chesterfield were exceptional champions, weren't they, to do what they did in the manner in which they did it. We all know that with Paul Cook in charge, they've got a very savvy operator who's already been there and done it in League Two before he did it in the National League, funnily enough. So he's somebody who has got promotion winning experience. He knows how to go again. He'll know how to tap into the momentum momentum that they should have going forward from what they achieved in the National League last season. They have made some reinforcements. I think people seem quite impressed with the business that they've done. Obviously, they've got a striker in there in Madden who's got that experience of playing in the level above and being promoted at the level above. There's defensive reinforcements that were obviously needed as well. I think a lot for Chesterfield will depend on that blend in terms of the balance of the side, because there's no doubt that, you know, the step up in class from the National League to League Two maybe isn't as big as some suggest, and there's always plenty of debate about that. But I think any defensive weaknesses would be more ruthlessly exposed at that level of the game, and therefore it was imperative that they work on the balance of the team this season, and also that they simply got in better defensive players. And I think that that's something that they're doing. They have got injury troubles at the moment. Chesterfield will see how much that will hamper them in the early weeks of the season, when they'll be looking to continue that momentum, that positive momentum that they had at the end of last season. But I would think that Chesterfield supporters would hope that their team would be at the very least mid-table. And I think that if they were to have a good season, I don't see why, with the quality that they've got in the squad, the manager that they've got, the reinforcements that we've seen, the backing that they've got crowd-wise, look, I don't see why they can't challenge for. I don't see why they couldn't challenge for the playoffs as well. Maybe automatic promotion. We'll see. I mean, I saw the other day actually recently that the bookies had them as favourites to win the title. I think that's a stretch. I think that'd be asking a lot, to be honest. I was very surprised at that, I've got to say. But there's a lot going for Chesterfield, and that positive momentum can be really, really powerful. In terms of Bromley, look, I think my expectations for them would not be as high. I just don't feel that the squad that went up was as well as the league table would tell you. It was not as strong as Chesterfield's. But what I would say about Bromley is that they impressed me so much as a football club as to how well that they are run. Saw them up close as well in the playoffs at the end of last season when we were on the gantry there, and you see what's going on around the club. You see their organisation off the pitch. I think Andy Woodman is a really savvy operator. There are people above him at the club as well who would also put into that category. I think they've got their house in order. I think that it was their time to go up. I think they were ready to go up. So there's a lot positive there as well. And if Bromley were to stabilise for a year in League Two and finish mid-table, lower mid-table, I would suggest that that's quite an achievement. Actually, I think it would be too much to ask for them to go again and look to get promoted again. I just don't think that they're in the same place as a Chesterfield. They're not the same size of club, are they? I mean, look, this is the first time they've played in the EFL. There has to be surely a period of adjustment and acclimatization. But as I say, I'm thoroughly impressed by how well run that club is off the pitch. Even just their analysis department. I mean, for what was then a non-league club, I was just kind of observing while I'm performing my role as a commentator, and even just on the gantry, you know, several people in their analysis team, and you might be aware that through that football manager competition, they brought a young lad in who was a football manager, who played football manager, and they sort of helped to launch his career as well by winning that competition. He was invited in to play his part. So there's a lot going on at Bromley, and a lot of it is very, very positive.
I do agree, Adam. I do agree. And I do agree with you when you say as well that maybe asking them to go again is something that's a bit too unrealistic. But I feel like anybody who's predicting them, or if anyone has predicted them to go down, I just feel like that's just a typical newest team to come up, probably won't fare in the league. But for me, especially, like, I think they finish at least mid-table. I feel like everything you've mentioned there about them in terms of like Woodman being an excellent coach, I agree with that. But I also just think naturally they're just a very difficult team to break down as well. They're very tall, very aggressive. I do feel like there'll be a place where not many League Two teams fancy going. And I just want to get your thoughts on that, because we've been there a few times in our past and I've not seen Notts win there once. So that says it all about how I see it. But how do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are people who will look at the playing style that Bromley have, and look, it isn't the most attractive, but I don't think that will bother them one bit. I don't think it'll bother Andy Woodman. There's lots of different ways to win football matches and to win competitions. A lot of people want to see it done in the most attractive way possible, but that's attractive football isn't always the most effective football. Bromley have found a way that certainly did last season and previously under Andy Woodman. That is something I think so important to point out when you're assessing Bromley's prospects going forward, is to remember that this isn't just an overnight success. This is something that's been developing very organically for a number of years, and which has got them to the point, which is why I said I felt that they were ready to go up. And that's important to remember as well, that it's not been at a click of a fingers. This has been something that's developed very gradually. And I think that gives you the stability when you do eventually get promoted, that, that the hard work that's gone into it can help. I think in terms of assessing them again, you'd have to look at the fact that they've always had the artificial surface there. Some would say it's an advantage. Some would say it doesn't really make a great deal of difference. Some players don't mind playing on it. Some players hate playing on it. Some people will say if it's your home pitch, it's always an advantage, like I say. So I suppose we'll get an idea, having had to tear up the artificial surface, as to just how big an advantage that was to them. But within the framework of how they play, as I said, and I agree with you, I think they're very effective at what they do. And he brings players in that are very capable and comfortable playing that style of football, and it served them very well. And I fully expect that it will serve them well in League Two. I think that the National League now, it really prepares teams very well indeed for promotion to the Football League, because of how tough it is at National League level. And I know there'll always be this conversation, this argument about how big the gap is between the two leagues, but the evidence over the years of the track record of teams who've been promoted would suggest that it does prepare teams very well for the challenges of League Two.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right. As you've said, the track record, well, it proves that, doesn't it? That it's very rare team will go up and then go straight back down.
Well, it's never happened.
Oh, it
never happened. No team has
okay.
ever been promoted from the National League and gone straight back down. It's never happened.
Then that just completely supports your argument that it more than allows people to adjust and make the team strong enough to push in the EFL. Looking at the National League still, today, John Bostock, former Notts County player, signed for Solihull Moors. A great signing for Solihull Moors. I think his quality in midfield is, you can't argue it. How influential is that going to be for Solihull next season, having that sort of experience, that winning mentality, who's been in the National League, who's got out of the National League before? Do you think Solihull, and does this make Solihull one of the title favourites? How is that going to influence the league?
Well, I mean, firstly, to say about Solihull is how incredibly sorry I felt for them at the end of last season when I was at Wembley, to see them lose both the National League promotion final and then the FA Trophy final as well. I mean, that is a lot to get over, isn't it? And I suppose when you're assessing what Solihull will do this season, you have to take that into consideration. And it's a massive task, isn't it, for the manager to almost be a bit of a psychologist, really, with the squad. I know, obviously, there are comings and goings like with any squad over a summer, but for those that remain from those double disappointments, I suppose it's how you manage to turn that disappointment into a determination. That's a key a key thing that he's going to have to achieve, and how well he did, by the way, in his first season with Solihull. Andy Wing, I was very, very impressed with what he did. And like you say, I mean, John Bostock is somebody who's won promotion from the National League. He's a very skillful player, technically one of the better players probably that I've seen at that level of the game. I was surprised that he maybe wasn't as influential as maybe I expected for Notts last season, having got promoted. We all know that he backs himself, doesn't he? We all know he's a confident lad, having watched him take that penalty at Wembley. And has taken penalties like that before in the past, as I've subsequently found out as well. So he's a confident lad. He's got so much experience that obviously they'll be tapping into it at Solihull Moors. And yeah, we'll see how it goes for him. But he's for that level of football, he's a very technically gifted player, isn't he?
100%, and you are right as well when you say he does back himself with them penalties. I'm not sure I'm over it yet, even though it's been a long while. This also, obviously, Bostock's left as well, but obviously you've seen Rawlinson as well. He's gone to Chester, and obviously that might have been more of a family-related move than others. But again, you see all these players sort of who not got promoted with going back down to the National League. What does that say about the level of football? Because everyone always says, like we spoke about previously as well, there's not too much difference between the levels now, and also we spoke about how the teams that get promoted, they've never gone back down. It just shows how well prepared they are. So do you think the moves like Bostock to Solihull and Rawlinson to Chester, and there'll be more in the future, don't get me wrong, is that an indication of how much the gap has sort of bridged between the quality difference?
Well, I mean, if I'm to look at the Notts County situation as a whole, I felt that this time last year that maybe there could have been more ruthlessness shown by the management towards the squad that had won promotion. Now, that's a hard thing to say in the manner in which they won promotion, because it was so dramatic and so much effort went into it, and so many players and the whole squad in total. They were magnificent, really, across the season, the way that they pushed aside with greater resources like Wrexham all the way. But football is a ruthless business. Sports a ruthless business. And I'm not going to sit here and name names, because I don't think that's a very kind thing to do. But there were players within that squad who I felt had done a great job to get Notts County up. But I wasn't sure that it was right to give extended deals to them or keep them on. I felt that maybe, like I say, I felt that there maybe needed to be a little bit more ruthlessness in terms of Notts County squad building, particularly on the defensive side of it. And look, there were reasons why it eventually caught up with Notts last season from a defensive perspective. One of them was losing Palmer, who for me is the most important player at that club, or was last season, and to lose him to injury for as long as they did, I thought it really badly damaged the balance of the side, and the defence was left vulnerable by that. But it did feel to me like they missed a trick a year ago by not focusing more recruitment attention on the defence. And I think contract extensions were fed into that, in terms of there was a loyalty perhaps shown to some players who had done great to get them up, but was it right? I mean, it's all easy to say these things I'm saying it in hindsight. I did actually say it at the time to quite a lot of people who I talked to about Notts County. But in terms of the gap between the two leagues, I mean, I suppose my opinion is just doesn't really count for anything like as much than for people who are managing and playing at that level. And all I can tell you is that year after year after year, the people who I ask, who've played at both EFL and National League level and managed at those levels, they say to me that there isn't a great difference between the two levels, and therefore, I bow to their greater depth of knowledge, really. There is a difference. There has to be, because it's a level up, but I don't think there's a huge difference. No, and I suppose you look at teams. I mean, I know people will just say, "Oh, they invested so much money," but look, Wrexham have gone straight up again. It took Stockport, what was it, 2 seasons? They finished in the playoffs in the first. I expect Notts to challenge this season. So, yeah, I don't think there's a huge gap, no.
No, we'll kind of move on from the National League. I know it's a topic we're all fond of, but something that's really interesting about your commentary to me is the amount of work that you do abroad and the amount of different leagues you cover, especially the Serie A, which I know you're a big fan of personally. How does the commentary sort of differ from when you're doing like a National League game or a League 2 game, League 1 game, whatever, and in the English leagues compared to that? If you're doing Milan versus Verona, for example?
I think the trick with whatever league you're covering as a broadcaster is to immerse yourself in it as much as you possibly can, learn about it, and treat it pretty much the same as you would any other league or level. That's what I always try to do with the National League. I would put as much effort into covering a National League game as I would a Champions League quarter-final, for instance. Because I think particularly with a league like the National League or with Serie A, where you might argue that it's a more niche audience, certainly there aren't as many eyeballs on it as there would be a Champions League quarter-final. You could make the argument that your research actually needs to be in some ways even better for something like Serie A or the National League, because you tend to find the people who are watching it, they really, really know it, and they really are quite immersed in it. So if they can see that you don't know your brief, it's a lot more obvious probably, and they'll sniff you out, and they will say, look, this guy doesn't know this guy's not done the prep, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So I think as a commentator, you do have to be aware of that, but that's not the motivation. The motivation should be your personal pride to do a fantastic job on whatever level of football you're doing. And it's also about a respect as well. It's a respect thing that I know as much about Solihull Moors left back as I do about AC Milan's left back, because they're both plying their trades. They're both footballers, and they're both doing their best. And I think it's important for me to show respect to my listener, my audience, that I know whatever game I'm covering, that I'm well briefed on and well researched on the players involved, whoever that may be. I think maybe the research challenges do differ slightly. The levels, in some ways, it can be harder to get information when you're covering a high level game, because covering a team like, for example, Manchester City or Manchester United or Arsenal, there's so much more information about those players and clubs out there. So a lot more people know a lot more about them. So you don't have to. So in order to tell somebody something they don't already know about those players or those teams, you have to really dig a bit deeper. So you have to maybe go at the extra mile in your research to really find out facts or stories or figures or whatever that people don't already know. I think that is a part of commentary. I know some of it is just calling what you see in front of you. There is an element of that, but I do think there is an onus on good commentary, and this is my personal opinion. Others would disagree, but I do think there is an onus for commentary to tell people something they don't already know. And a key skill for me of any good commentator is that you don't shoehorn that in. You use it if it's appropriate. So you might have this killer bit of information that you're dying to tell everybody about, but if the game doesn't warrant it, or the game's 100 miles an hour and it doesn't need any facts or figures or any color, it just needs you to say what's happening on the pitch, then a part of the skill is being ruthless enough to say, I'm not going to shoehorn that in because it just doesn't warrant it right now. And it might just never see the light of day. So a lot of your prep might just end up as what you'd call the cutting room floor. It never sees the light of day. You might only use a third of it. So you're constantly thinking from an editorial perspective in real time. And that's a really important aspect of commentary, is knowing how, when, and where to use the knowledge that you've gained in preparing for the game.
Do you find it when you obviously do the games abroad, like the Serie A and all the European finals, do you find it, a little bit more pressure? Because obviously, as you mentioned there, you have to do almost a lot more sort of research, because there's people, obviously the people out there, they know, they like you said, they're clued up on their stuff. They'll know if you've said things wrong, etc. Does that make it a lot more pressure for you to make sure you do the right preparation? Because obviously, again, I can imagine there's quite a lot of players that you've watched play on commentary that you have been unfamiliar with, and therefore they obviously require more research than you Rafael Leao's, your Teo Hernandez's, etc. So do you find that a bit more pressure?
Well, I mean, I suppose you could say that there is more pressure the more eyeballs that are on a game. I tend not to really think about that too much, but it goes without saying. I mean, you're going to have a lot more people watching Manchester City against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, is a game that I did last season, than you would having, say, watching Solihull against Kidderminster. That is clear that you're going to have more people watching it. So I think you are obviously aware of the fact that there's going to be more eyeballs on it. So I suppose you could say that brings more pressure, but I don't really care how many people are watching a game. The more the merrier, obviously. But that's not really my concern. My concern is to go out there and make sure whatever level of the game that I'm covering, that I do it to the very best of my ability. And I think that you can, as a broadcaster, you can get too wrapped up in numbers and audience figures, and it's not really something that I put too much focus on, really. I don't think about it too much. Other people might do more, but I think it's just about the pressure really for me is during the week. The commentary is the easy bit really, because you just get to go and enjoy a game and enjoy the flow of it and enjoy being at the stadium. And the pressure really is the juggling of your time in the week with all, say you're doing, I don't know, 3-4 games in a week. 4 would be a really, really busy week. And the challenge for me as a commentator is to be able to juggle and find enough time in between all the other things we have to do in our lives, like looking after the kids, and traveling between places. It's making sure that you've done enough prep that you can go into the game feeling confident, because that's where, as a commentator, as a broadcaster, for me, that you get your confidence from to go on air and express yourself, is knowing that you've done the work, that you've done the job, that you've done the hard yards, because then that gives you confidence, and then that in turn should breed authority, on-air authority, which then hopefully helps lead to good commentary. So it's a bit of a domino effect, really. If you go into a game knowing that you've probably cut a lot of corners, you've not done your best, or for whatever reason, you're maybe not across your brief as much as you should, I would have thought that would lead to a poorer standard of commentary, because you'd lack confidence in knowing your subject, and therefore you would lack authority because you would know you hadn't done the work. So research is hugely important, and probably that is where I feel the pressure the most, actually, is to get that the right, because you can do too much as well. You can I think be over prepared. I mean, some people would say you can never be over prepared, or you can never know enough, but I think you can sometimes fill your head too much, and sometimes you have to say, look, enough's enough now. I'm well briefed, I know my subject, I'm confident, I'm across any particular eventualities. Let's just go for it now and get a good night's sleep and go and do the game. So there's always that temptation to do that bit more research, but I think there is a tipping point where that can become negative rather than positive.
Oh, lovely stuff. It's nice to know that. Just very, very quickly, which do you prefer? Do you prefer doing something on the like abroad? Do you prefer doing the sort of European competitions? Do you prefer something like a National League game?
I wouldn't. I mean, I suppose in terms of developing your career, and everybody wants to go as high as they possibly can, I guess, in whatever profession they choose. So for me as a football commentator, the bigger the games, the more people that are watching them, that's ultimately what you want to be doing. You want to be doing the biggest games. You want to be doing Champions League quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals. I was fortunate to do a Europa League final last season. You have to have aspirations, I think, to want to go as high as you possibly can do. So I suppose that's ultimately where you want to be, and where I certainly strive to be, and continue to do so, and always will, really. But as much as you want to do the biggest games for that reason, and also because you're watching a fantastic standard of football as well, I love the National League for very different reasons. I love the National League because for reasons that I've already explained to you. I love the storytelling side of it. I love spotting rough diamonds. I love the fact that we can shine a spotlight on people who deserve that exposure but don't normally get it. As we've already alluded to, the whole storytelling side of it. So there's different reasons to enjoy different leagues and competitions. I enjoy Serie A because it's quite a personal thing to me. I was part of the generation that grew up watching Gazzetta Football Italia in the 90s. And so therefore it's just been a passion of mine throughout my life. And now I'm able to commentate on games and fixtures that as a young lad, I was sat in front with my legs crossed in front of the telly watching it at 9-10 years old, So there's all different things that you can take and reasons why you enjoy covering different levels of football. And that variety I quite enjoy, actually.
It sounds good. Look, I think I've asked you this before, but for the sake of this podcast, I'll ask you this again. Obviously, as well, in the Notts Wrexham title race, you speak about exposure for players. Well, let's talk about exposure for yourself, because, I mean, your voice is now connected with, Foster penalty save. Although may I add, I hate thinking about that. The Bostock free kick at Wembley, the Kedwin Scott penalty. We talk about exposure for players, but exposure for yourself as well. Do you feel like that's helped you elevate in terms of getting these? Obviously, I'm not saying like you obviously were a very good commentator prior, but these are the moments that have stuck, especially with myself and Matt. But anyone really who watches the National League, and again, it would have been the same for probably, your Chesterfield, your Bromleys last season. Do you feel like that sort of covering this level of football has helped you elevate your career as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been very good for me professionally. And like you say, moments like that do bring you more to the attention of people who might be able to positively influence your career. Producers, managers, whatever, and also the public as well. And if people are talking about you nicely, then that's fantastic, because you want to move on and you want to develop in your career. And for me, the National League was just a fantastic it just came at the right time for me, because I'd started working at what was then BT Sport when it first launched in 2013 as a freelancer. I wasn't very well known. I'd been working in football coverage for a long time, but on maybe things that people wouldn't, on stuff that didn't have as many eyeballs on it. And that was something for me, that BT Sport came along at just the right time. I was in my early 30s. I was looking for a bit of a break in the industry. And I started off covering the European leagues like Serie A and the Bundesliga and Liga. And that was like my route in there. That was kind of the level entry to go in there. But in order to develop my career and move up the ladder at what was BT Sport then, it was important that I did some stuff because that's all what we're not actually at the game. We're not in Italy. We're not in France. We're not in Germany. We're doing it from a monitor in somewhere in London usually. And so in order to further my career, I needed to be doing stuff that was what we would call on site. So I was part of an on site production and all the things that go with that. And you've got a director in your ear, whereas when I'm doing the world feed, there's no director really in my ear. There might be someone telling me when I need to put a promo in or when we're going to an ad break or whatever. But the difference between, to explain to people, when I'm commentating on, say, Serie A and I'm doing it from London on a feed, really throughout the game, there's not really any voices talking in my ears. All I'm hearing is a little bit of direction, as I say, as to when to put a promo in or whatever. Whereas when I'm doing an on-site commentary, which is what the National League was, where you've got all the trucks there, you've got a director who's picking the pictures for you. So when we're doing a world feed game or we're getting a world feed, we have no say in the pictures. They're just coming from Italy and we have to react to whatever pictures we get. Whereas when I'm covering a National League game, I can press a button that cuts out my mic and I can speak directly to the director who's picking the pictures and say, can you get me a shot of Macaulay Langstaff, please? And then I can say, oh, I want that shot of Macaulay Langstaff, and because I want to say something about Macaulay Langstaff, and they'll paint the pictures to what I'm saying. So it's a lot more involved, and it's a lot different, and it's a greater test for a commentator. You've got people in your ears. You have somebody talking almost constantly while you're talking. There's in the gallery, you can hear most things that are going on. You can hear the conversation that is happening between director and maybe your co-com as well. So it's a greater skill really, because you have to filter noise in and out, but also be talking at the same time. So in order for me to progress my career, I had to really prove that I could do that kind of stuff really. So the National League was a great in for me to be able to move up the ladder at TNT, at BT as it was then. And I really said, look, if anyone gives me an opportunity to cover the domestic football, I'll really grab it and make it my own and learn the league and immerse myself in it. And that's exactly what I did really, and really threw myself into it. And I suppose, I'd like to think that we've given it a lot of love and energy and passion, sort of tried to sell the league, bigged it up, shouted about it, and just given the league the kudos and the respect that it deserves really for that level of the game. I'm very proud of everything that I've done on the National League. And you're right when you say, look, it has helped elevate my career, and I've moved on. I'm doing things now like major European finals, and I'm commentating on Real Madrid against Manchester City and things like that. But I'll never ever take for granted how important in my career covering that level of football has been. It's been hugely important, and it's very important as well to remember your roots in that respect.
Oh, brilliant. In terms of you've like just said there, in terms of remembering your roots, because the sports media industry is a difficult place to get into. There's not really just an application form you can fill out online like most other jobs. we would like to know how you first got into sports media, how you first got your break into this role you're in now.
Well, I did broadcast journalism at university. I was there for 3 years in Nottingham. Enjoyed the course, learnt a lot about, I suppose, mainly really being a radio reporter primarily. We did it was by media, so you did TV and radio. We had to produce a little documentary as part of our dissertation, and mine was a TV documentary. But as with most people, you go into radio first when you get out in the big wide world. And I started out working in what was called RSLs, restricted service licenses, where a company will say, look, we're just going to test out this area. We might want to take on a radio license that's available there. We'll go there for a month, see if we like it. We'll see if the local people like us. And then we'll make a decision as to whether to bid for the license. And that would have been sort of around 2002, I think it was. And I worked on a few of those in Torbay and in Barrow, in Furness, and lived in those areas for a month each time while I worked out of a caravan in a supermarket car park, sort of helping to run a local radio station, really. And then I got my first job in local radio at Mansfield 103.2 in Mansfield, still around now. Great little local radio station. And they allowed me to just it was almost like going to university again, but the practical stage of it, if that makes sense. They just went in and said, look, go, be a newsreader, be a news journalist, be a radio reporter, be a presenter. And that was where I was first asked if I would like to have a go at football commentary. And the first time I did it, I never really had thought about being a commentator. I always fancied the idea of being a reporter at games where they would cross over to you for maybe 30 seconds for a quick score update or whatever. I quite thought I would quite like to do that. But I never saw myself as a commentator. But they decided that they thought I might be decent at it, gave me a go. And I mean, I wouldn't like to listen back to it now. I can imagine it sounds pretty ropey, to be honest, when I first commentated on a game in 2003. But the game was frantic, crazy, absolutely brilliant game of football. All sorts was going on. And I was hooked after that. I thought, oh, wow, I want to do that more. I've really got such an adrenaline rush from doing it. And I thought I have to find a way to do that. And then it's a long journey because you're working your way up and you continuing to work in newsrooms and learn your trade, you sort of marry up all different aspects of being a broadcaster. So you continue to be a radio reporter, you continue doing maybe some football reporting, but also a bit of commentary. You might do a bit of presenting, and all those skills eventually feed into what I do now, which is solely commentary, but I still use all of those different skills. Interviewing skills, that's another aspect that comes into it from being a radio reporter. And it's for me, it was a very, very gradual journey up the ladder from working out of a supermarket car park to local radio, then regional radio, bits of national radio, world feed TV. And it was I started in that supermarket car park in 2002. And I got my first I would say my big break came in 2013 when BT Sport launched, and they gave me a chance straight away. And that was where I was then really able to take things to the next level then. And eventually, after a couple of years there, focus entirely on just being a football commentator, whereas I had been working like 7 days a week because I couldn't earn enough money covering football at the weekends, or didn't have enough work from covering football. So I had to work in newsrooms during the week, doing sort of what I called the bread and butter work, to then sort of pay the bills and then do the football at the weekends, get enough clients that I could eventually just focus on the football. And that's what I did. But it's a very long journey from there to where I've got to now. But I wouldn't change it because I felt like I learned so much along the way that will always stand me in good stead.
So you kind of alluded to it at the end there, but I wanted to ask you, Adam, obviously you mentioned your first game of commentary 2003, obviously big break in 2013 with BT. Obviously in between, that's 10 years, and that's virtually 10 years of process, different jobs, learning and, being almost taught different things. I just want to ask you, how important do you think the process stage is? Because obviously, it's common for like uni students when they finish their degree, they think, oh, now it's time to go and get a big job, go and get my break, but it don't always happen at the click of your fingers. So how important would you say like the process stages of, going places, learning, being taught, taking these things on with you, like yourself from 2003 with your first commentary game to now where you're on all the big heights, big finals, how important do you think that process stage is?
I think it's hugely important. I've seen people who've taken much shorter routes for whatever reason. Everyone's career journey is different, isn't it? Whatever walk of life that you're in, I understand that people have different journeys, and it can take one person double the time to make the same length of journey. So we're all different. But for me personally, that process, although it was quite arduous at times, there were struggles along the way because obviously, I mean, once I'd got to when BT Sport launched in 2013, I was at a bit of a crossroads mentally in terms of where I was going with my career, because I'd got to the point where I wasn't just a young lad anymore. I wasn't fresh out of university. I was a dad of two small children with a mortgage and a wife. And I was just thinking, there's got to come a point here where I have to say that I have to knock this on the head and do something, because I wasn't earning good money. I wasn't earning enough money for us to get, when we were in quite a cramped house, and we were desperate to get a bigger house for the kid, for the kids. And you have all those worries as well. And I just thought I might just give it, one more year of just trying to get that break, or try and move to that next level, or move into something where I thought there was more prospect of that next level in terms of money. And I really was. I mean, I was doing things like going down to London to work on world feed games that weren't very well paid. And because they weren't well paid, and obviously I didn't have any accommodation of my own in London, and I was struggling to afford to pay for hotels and things like that, that I was having to, one mate in particular, who's actually now, it's still a really good mate, and actually is a commentator himself on Match of the Day. He would just say, look, we're working in a similar area, just bunk down on my settee for the night. And I would do that regularly, where I'd go down to London and I'd do a couple of 2 or 3 nights down there. And I'd sleep on his settee just to save the 200 quid that it might have cost me for a hotel for a couple of nights or whatever. So there was all those kind of situations. And I had got to a point where I thought, well, can I keep doing this? Can I keep chasing this dream? Or do I have to say at what I was, 32, 33, I need to do something different where I'm going to have a better chance of earning good money? But as I say, I was fortunate of the timing of the launch of BT Sport, and I'll always have a loyalty to that company, because they gave me a chance, and they believed in me, and they trusted me, and they gave me that opportunity where others hadn't, where, for many years, I'd had that kind of, every summer I would send an email to, you can probably guess, I'm not going to name the company, but you can probably guess. I'd send emails every summer, will you give me a chance? And they always replied, and it was always, oh yeah, we like we like your demo, but obviously we've got lots of commentators, and we'll see if we can throw something your way during the season. Then the season would come, the season would go, and there would still be no opportunity, and you start to lose faith really that you'll ever get that chance. Because I knew I could do it. You see, I knew I could do it. I knew if somebody gave me the chance that I could do it, and I knew I was good enough to develop and get better in the right environment to get better and go on and do the things that I have done. So I always believed in myself. But this is what's so important to get across to people, and why you asking me about this journey, and why it's important to have the knocks and to have the experiences that you have working on lower level things in the media. It's because it just builds that character, and it builds that passion and that energy and that determination. And I always just had it in my head, look, if this break ever comes where I get the chance where I can do something at a high level, look, I'm not just gonna, shake their hand. I'm gonna bloody tear it off. I'm so determined. I'm just got all this pent up, what's the word? Energy, that I really want to be a success, and I really want to do well. That I was just, if anyone gives me that chance, boy, am I going to take it. And so when they did, I did take it. I worked as hard as I possibly could, worked my way up the ladder at BT, and now I'm, like I say, I'm doing some really great stuff, and I wouldn't swap the length of journey though, because I think as well, for any young broadcaster, if you're tempted to take shortcuts, what I'd say is, I think sometimes the knowledge that you build up and the skills that you build up, you might not even realize in a live commentary situation that knowledge or skill has got you out of a situation that wouldn't have been great had you not had that knowledge or skill from the past. You sort of, it's like muscle memory that you develop over a number of years. Whereas if you haven't got that experience to fall back on in a tricky situation, I think it can be more difficult for you. That nous of how to deal with situations that are out of the blue with live sport, because it's not scripted. Anything can happen, and very often does. And you have to have the tools within your sort of your broadcasting set to be able to deal with whatever's thrown your way, really. And that's hugely important, is that journey to having that skill set.
Oh, lovely stuff. I think that kind of, we're bringing it to the end of our kind of conversation here. Just kind of quickly looking, you've gone through the process and how you got into the industry. Have you got any sort of tips or advice for people wanting to get into the industry?
Yeah, I'd always say to people that get as much experience as you can, even if you're doing a university course or broadcast journalism course. It's what you, as I've just really been describing there, you need to get hours on the mic. You need to get out there in the field, interviewing people, having difficult situations, having things not go right. I mean, that's how you learn way more than you do when things go well. I can tell you that for absolute certain, as somebody who's been doing this for quite a long time. You know, a bad day is actually as a young reporter or commentator, you might not realize it at the time, but it can actually be a very good day for you in the fullness of time. So you just have to, it's not really you can do a broadcast journalism course like I did, but whilst they can teach you certain skills, you have to go out and get those hours on the mic. It's particularly for commentary. It's not, I can sort of give people tips on what makes good commentary, but you have to do it yourself, really, to be able to get good at it. It's not like something where you can just say, well, you do this and you do that and you'll get that outcome, because it's live, it's unscripted. You've got to learn how to do it. So hours on the mic are vitally important. So you've got to be volunteering, probably to begin with, at university radio, hospital radio, your local BBC station, maybe even your local commercial station. I know sometimes these days people are doing things off their own bat with YouTube channels and social media. That's opened up. I think you two guys have both done that, haven't you? That opens up so many avenues now, because you can take control of it yourselves. You don't have to rely on somebody giving you a chance. You can give yourself a chance, because you can, which wasn't really open as much to someone like me when I was starting out, because YouTube, just wasn't a thing. So, you can control your own destiny a little bit more in that respect, but learn your trade, think outside the box, prepare meticulously, always be prepared to go the extra mile in whatever it is that you may be doing. And again, I'll go back to research on that, which is fundamental, but get an all-round experience as well. If you want to be a commentator, don't get obsessed with that to begin with. Go out there and get experience as a newsreader, as a reporter, even sometimes things that aren't necessarily broadcast, like a bit of writing can help as well. All these different skills can help you with interviewing, even try and do a bit of presenting, become an all-round broadcaster, because that's what, in the world of work, people want you to be an all-rounder these days, so that they can throw you into different situations. I mean, even though I am a commentator, I'm employed as a commentator, people could turn to me, and they do regularly, and say, look, we've got a problem. Somebody's not here. Somebody's fallen ill. Our reporter, who was meant to be interviewing, as happened to me last season, was meant to be interviewing Andre Onana and Erik ten Hag. They can't do that now, Adam. So would you mind coming down from the commentary box, go and interview Erik ten Hag and Andre Onana, and just get us out of a difficult spot? Well, yeah, of course, because I'm fine doing that. It's no problem. I can do an interview. That's easy. Whereas if I've not got that more all-round experience, I might be like, what, you want me to do an interview? I'm not sure I could do that, So it's very important to have that all-round experience, because they all feed into each other. So yeah. And I think the other thing is to just work hard, try and separate yourself from other people. Don't just do what everybody else does. Do what you think is needed to your standards. Don't just follow what other people's standards are, and enjoy it, because that's, for me, that's so important, is that I get a kick out of, I've got a real enthusiasm for what I do. I love what I do, and hopefully that comes out on air. And for me, if I'm watching TV or listening to the radio and I can hear that the commentator loves what they're doing, I enjoy their broadcast more. I enjoy listening to that radio commentary or TV commentary more, because I think if you're listening to someone who's not enjoying themselves, you think to yourself, well, why should I listen then? If they're having such a terrible time, why should I be listening to them? So I think that's really important as well, is to enjoy what you do and put a lot of energy and enthusiasm into it.
100%. And I feel like that's a good place to wrap it up. But before we do that, Matt, I have one more question for you, Adam, and it's a jokey one, as you may be able to tell by my smile on my face. I have let you off for this question before. I will not be doing it again. When are we going to finally admit that you are a lifelong Notts County fan?
I get this all the time. I live. I mean, I don't know how many people know this, but I've always took a little bit of an interest in Notts County, particularly over the last few years. And the reasons for it, there are several reasons, which might finally answer the question for you, is that I live in Nottingham. I went to university in Nottingham. I actually started out covering Mansfield Town, and then I also covered Hucknall Town. So I've always covered local Nottinghamshire teams. And whenever I cover a team or an area, I always kind of look out for their scores, and I get a little bit of a soft spot for them. And the 2022-23 season in the National League is one that probably brings a smile to my face the most, because it was just an absolutely thrilling title race to cover and all the drama that went with it. So that's another reason that I have a soft spot for Notts County. But I'd also say that right now, as I'm talking to you, one of my daughters is in a Notts County kit playing for Notts County at a tournament. So one of my children plays for the club. So there's several reasons. I'm not a Notts County fan. I never go into teams I support, because that's not good for business as a commentator, as I'm sure you'll all appreciate, because you're forever accused of bias when there is no bias. But anyway, I do have a big soft spot for Notts County, and I always look out for their results. And as I say, I live in the city. My daughter plays for them. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I don't think it has it? He's still convinced.
Yeah. Look, I think obviously, again, look, you have to do it for business. You got to say you do, but I know deep down in that heart.
I'm actually from the Northwest. I don't know if I've lived in Nottingham longer than I lived where I grew up, but I am actually. I'm not from Nottingham originally. I grew up in the Northwest. So there you go.
Well, Adam, thank you ever so much. This has been really, really fun. I know personally I've really enjoyed this. I'm sure Casey has as well. I'm hoping you've enjoyed our little conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Casey, thank you again for joining me and stepping in as my little guest host. I really appreciate it again.
Not a problem. Not a problem at all.
And Adam, yeah, and to you too. And from all of us at the Sports News Blitz, we wish you the very best of luck for the upcoming season.
Thank you.